Welcome, everyone, to Buddha's Center. My name is Jeff Allen, and once again, tonight we're discussing Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, and specifically the sectioning on the awakening mind. And we've been going over the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And I think that we'll finish that up this evening so that next class we can move on to equalizing, exchanging self with others. But before we get started with any of that, yes, we're outside in this wonderful garden. This was Rinpoche's garden. He used to sit out here for 2 summers before this summer and water the plants and watch us plant all these different things out here. And many of them are perennials, and we get to see them come back. I think that's the one that comes back. I'm learning. I'm getting an education in all of this. Lori was the one who was just so pivotal in making sure that this garden is beautiful and was beautiful when Rinpoche was here. But we just enjoyed it so much, and Rinpoche would come out here at 6 in the morning sometimes, and then insist he would stay out here to eat his breakfast, to eat his lunch. And he didn't eat dinner, but he would stay out here until 7 o'clock at night sometimes. And it was so wonderful to have him here and just to be able to see the example of a true practitioner, someone who, wherever they were, day and night, just engaged in practice and engaged in practice with the environment around him. You would see him just praying for all sentient beings, sitting out here and being able to interact with some of the animal realm that were out here while he would sit in this beautiful garden. So that's why we're out in the garden, because of that inspiration that took place that now has blossomed into all of these wonderful things. And the original prayer flags that Rinpoche had us hang up are still hanging up there somewhere in there between the new Kalachakra and White Tara prayer flags. So we have a constant reminder, besides all of the wonderful teachings that he gave us, but of Rinpoche's presence, just with this beautiful garden, the beautiful prayer flags, and the memory of the beautiful Kalachakra fire puja that we had here. So without further ado, let's get into a physical posture that allows us to be intentional about our practice, that allows us to be able to sit for longer and longer periods of time. And have a clarity of mind that's necessary in order for us to then hone in on it with a calm abiding and concentration. So a clarity of wisdom, and that clarity comes about through various causes and conditions, and one of them being our physical posture. So if we could get into what we've talked about many, many times so far, the 7-point Vairakana posture, doing it to the best of our ability, putting our legs into the, ideally the Vajra posture, our hands in our laps, with our right on our left, with our thumbs touching, with our back straight, thinking that our vertebrae is like a stack of coins. It should be very straight. We have a tendency to sit, kind of lean back or hunch forward, but we should really try to be intentional and get our spine straight. And again, this helps with clarity of mind. Our shoulders in a comfortable position that allow kind of for our arms to bow out just a slight bit. And then our heads slightly tilted downward, with our eyes slightly open at a 45-degree angle, pointing at the tip of our nose, and then our tongue on the roof of our mouth, with our mouth resting in a comfortable position. And then we're going to focus on the breath going in and out of our nose. So we'll get into those 7 specific postures, and then we'll make it an 8th division, an 8th step, which will be the breath going in and out of our nose. So we should focus on the breath, bringing it in all the way to the top of the breath and exhaling it all the way out. And just be focusing our mental consciousness on that breath going in and going out, and counting it as it goes out, going in and going out. 1, going in, going out. 2. And as we're meditating upon the breath, let's see if we can add the visualization, just add a small little bit to our visualization within our mental consciousness. And that is that we, in the space in front of us, about 2 feet, we imagine about the length of our thumb, maybe 2 inches, So 2 feet in front of us, about 2 inches large. We can imagine Buddha Shakyamuni. Now, if we have a meditational deity that we use to develop single-pointed concentration on a daily basis, obviously we will use that specific object of observation during this exercise while we're focusing on the breath and doing this visualization. But if we don't have a specific object of observation, let's just focus on the image of Buddha Shakyamuni and just try to only focus on the breath in and out and only focus on the image of Buddha Shakyamuni in front of us, holding the begging bowl with the right hand touching the ground slightly, and a golden body with the beautiful, beautiful robes. And imagine the image that we've seen so many times. Maybe you have a specific image that you use. We should have the same image that we use over and over again. But right now, we're just trying to see if we can focus our minds on the breathing and on Buddha Shakyamuni. And Buddha Shakyamuni isn't like a normal human we're imagining in front of us. It is a being that is a three-dimensional being we're imagining, but it's a pure being, a being that doesn't have blood and organs and all of these different things inside of him or her if you're visualizing something else. But it's a being whose body is like light, whose body is like light, but is also in our meditation very solid in front of us and heavy. So we're not imagining it when I say light, meaning like it's transparent and giving off light rays in all directions. So if we can focus on the breath and then imagine Buddha Shakyamuni in that way in front of us while we're in this 7-point Vairakana posture, and we can try to check our minds to see if we're wavering. Let's see if our minds are moving off of the object of observation. Let's see if our mind is getting busy and starting to talk too much and excited and not focusing on Buddha Shakyamuni. Let's use our vigilance, our introspection to see if we're sinking and sleepy and the image of Buddha Shakyamuni isn't really clear and it's kind of disintegrating as we're trying to visualize it. So we want to keep trying to rein it back in, rein our minds back to the breath and the image of Buddha Shakyamuni over and over again so that we can maintain this kind of single-pointed focus, and it allows us to start practicing focusing our minds so that we're in our daily interactions, we can sometimes slow down the process and be able to look at all aspects of it and then react more rationally. So it's by practicing things like this that allow us to harness our mind in, that will have the benefit of allowing us to interact more realistically in our daily lives, but then will also ultimately have the benefit of allowing our mind to be extremely stable for us to be able to focus on a very bright, clear wisdom that we've analyzed. So we'll be able to make a union of the special insight and calm abiding through focusing on one object and getting very good at it. And then also in other times of meditation, analyzing things very well and getting very good at it. And then combining those two kind of superpowers together to be able to see emptiness eventually and to be able to cut the root of cyclic existence. So let's see what we can do. Let's do the best that we can to get into that posture. And we'll sit for just a moment and try and breathe and focus on the object only. We shouldn't be focusing on anything coming in through our ears, anything that we're seeing. We're trying to just get rid of whatever we're seeing at the end of our nose, whatever that kind of blurry thing is that we're still seeing through our eyes slightly opened. We're trying to shut that off and only focus on what our mind is focusing on. We're telling our mind we're only focusing on breathing and this object of observation of the Buddha. So let's do that for a moment. begin to think about why we are here this evening? Think about your own personal sufferings. Think about the manifest sufferings, the suffering of change, pervasive compounded suffering, those manifest things such as headaches, illnesses, hurt feelings, meeting with the unpleasant, being separated from the pleasant. The pain that you feel from those experiences. Buddha said was called the suffering of suffering, general pain. All the forms of happiness that we chase after, that we think that will satisfy us, turn into a form of suffering. Like entering a cold room when we're hot and then becoming freezing. We experience the greatest amount of happiness going into that cold room because we were so hot. And then the self-destruct mechanism within that contaminated happiness took over. And that cold, pleasant feeling turned into an unpleasant, cold feeling. All contaminated happinesses will do this. Will turn into some form of suffering. We've seen it happen so many times in our own lives. With material things we've chased after. Recognize that the Buddha taught various forms of suffering, the 8 types of suffering, suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, the suffering of being separated from the pleasant, meeting with the unpleasant, not getting what you want, and being forced into contaminated aggregates. Think about how true all of those things are. The sufferings just mentioned, the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and then the pervasive compounded suffering, which we find throws us again and again and again because of our karma and afflictions into a set of contaminated aggregates. And we don't really have any control over that because of our ignorance. So that ignorance, which throws us again and again and again into cyclic existence, and among the 6 realms of cyclic existence of the hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, demigod, and God. The Buddha stated that that ignorance, if cured, would no longer produce any of those unpleasant effects again. The Buddha stated that all forms of cyclic existence, all sufferings in cyclic existence could end if we got rid of the ignorance. And the Buddha stated that there was a pathway that superior beings realized that combated ignorance. The Buddha stated that these beings realized 16 attributes of these 4 noble truths and directly understood the nature of suffering, the origin of suffering, and the pathway that it would take to engage to get rid of it. So we should feel a little bit relieved because the Buddha told us that we never have to experience any of those things just mentioned ever again. That we could stop being thrown around like a rag doll by our ignorance and take control. That the suffering of suffering, the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering had one specific cause, and that's ignorance. The grasping at things as being truly established. The grasping at I as being inherently existent. And that in dependence upon that ignorance, We thought funny. We had inappropriate mental conduct, which then started the afflictions, such as attachment, hatred, and ignorance, delusion, which then caused us to have contaminated actions, which then created every type of suffering we ever had. We should feel so relieved that the Buddha taught us a way to cut the root of cyclic existence. We could get rid of all suffering altogether. That we needn't chase after partial cures. The Buddha stated that there was a very, very specific cure that would end our suffering, that would take away all of our fears. Now we start to think about other sentient beings, think about the sentient beings that we love, those close to us in our lives, those who've maybe passed on that we loved. We think about all those sentient beings. We think about those that are strangers to us, who are neutral to us, and that they have to experience all of these sufferings, and we think about those beings that we consider our enemies and recognize that they have these sufferings. And when we look at the meditation on equanimity, we realize that friends, enemies, and neutrals all have been equally kind to us, have taken care of us in our most vulnerable state, and that all those three types of beings, all sentient beings, have Buddha nature. Every single one of these sentient beings, including myself, can become the most important person in the world, in all worlds, become the greatest being in all worlds. Every single sentient being has that same potential. Every single sentient being wants happiness, doesn't want suffering, just like myself. And we start to think how nice it would be if these beings had happiness and were free from suffering also. And we feel a little bit of relief because we know that we've found a solution, so they could have one too. And we start to think how nice it would be if we could be part of that solution. May we be part of that solution. But in order to be part of that solution, we have to be reliable. We have to be the best helper. We have to be someone who has gotten rid of all of the sufferings ourselves and has infinite happiness to export, infinite love to export, to give to others. That's the most reliable type of being, a being who's omniscient and who has infinite love, infinite happiness to export. We aren't that kind of being yet. We can be. We have the same mental consciousness that the Buddha possesses, a mind that is clear and knowing. Our mind is empty of true existence, just like the Buddha's mind. So we have this commonality, we have this Buddha nature, this Buddha potential. We have the natural Buddha nature and the proliferating Buddha nature. Our mind can turn into the Buddha's mind. Because it's empty of true establishment. So in order to be of aid to all sentient beings, we must become Buddhas. And in order to become Buddhas, we must have the wisdom arisen from hearing, analysis, and meditation. We have to accumulate enormous amounts of merit. So should be for that reason that we're here tonight. We're attending this teaching on Bodhicitta in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. We should imagine that all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are in the space all around us and are so pleased, are so happy that we're engaging in virtuous activities, that we're reciting prayers and we're listening to the Dharma. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are so happy that someone's instructing the Dharma. We see Khensa Rinpoche in the space in front of us, Geshe Lobsang Gompo, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, all the Lamas and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all around us, so pleased and so happy with what we're doing. And then we imagine all around us are all sentient beings. Sentient beings in the hell realm, hungry ghost realm, animal realm, human, demigods, gods, our friends, enemies, and neutrals. Imagine those beings are all around us and that we're leading them in these prayers. And we say the prayer that may all these sentient beings understand these teachings, be saying these teachings in their own individual languages and be understanding them. So may all beings hear this Heart Sutra in whatever language they understand it in, and understand the words, the implicit and explicit meaning of this. Imagine that all sentient beings are around us chanting this and moving closer to Buddhahood because of it, and that we're leading all sentient beings in this prayer. We're leading all sentient beings in the mandala offering. Imagine they're all making a mandala offering, offering a perfect world system to all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are so, so happy that all sentient beings are doing such a wonderful thing at this time. And we imagine that we lead all sentient beings in refuge. So with this thought in mind, let's begin with the Heart Sutra. May all sentient beings hear and understand these holy words. The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard, once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way, seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form, emptiness is no other than form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I dhatu up to no mind dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the Bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of Prajnaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth since there is no deception. The Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Te ata om gate gate paragate parasangate bodhisoha. Thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound Prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. Ngala jibe ne jodamba ne nguji du ju nga yi du do jen ju ba bo la ma yi bo jin zi ni zung gan zho zo la sha zi lo aga zamara de jandara zamara ebe aga zamara de jandara zamara. Aga samara da chandara samara ya me de adon gate gate baragate barasangati bodhisoha Baba Ganja Zanji Gai Dimbe Doji She Lobo Doji Mebo Doji Shewa Doji Jagi Baji Medu Beju Dot Jedingo Yeso Girin Donja Jeju Shewa Dan Medun Vejanda Newa Dan Dumba Janji Bunzon Zanjoji Tashi De Jan Da De Le Jo. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. Zai mu ni yu me ro re ra li ni re ma i zon ye Inu mi o ai ro na i la yo ba yo ye zo la ma da ma ni na ni yo yo ga la yin zi yun zin ji ye da zang be du ye zin ma la za ji ju ji ja ba wa do zo. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Yedam Guru Rana Mandala Gani Radayam. Sanye Jadan Jaye Janam La Yanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jije Jibe Zananji Rala Benji Zanye Jubajo Zanye Jadan Jaye Janan La Yanju Badu Danye Jazuji Dagi Jije Jibe Zananji Jola Benji Zanye Jubar Jo Zanye Jadan Zaye Janan La Janju Badu Danye Yazuji Dagi Jishe Jibe Zonanji Jola Benji Zanye Jubar Jo. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher Sugata, and protector to you, I make prostrations. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays, to you, Buddha, I make prostrations. Inspired by wisdom and compassion today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. Okay. So thank you for coming to listen to the Holy Dharma on another Thursday evening. We've been looking at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection, and as we know, it begins with an outline, as all great textbooks do when we look at our tradition and Panchen Sonandrapa's works and all of the works of the other masters and textbook writers of the great monastic institutions. We always find the outline that, everyone stays by, very strict. And then that way, where each thing fits, and make sure that you give a complete teaching and don't leave anything out in terms of explanation. So that's what we've been doing. We've been going through the outline in the section on the awakening mind in Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. And we've used other sections of that text to help us explain this section. But specifically, we're dealing with the section on the awakening mind, on mind generation in this text, the general meaning of perfection. And there are 4 specific categories that we will complete by the end of this series of teachings. I don't know when that will be. I think this is the 11th one this evening. Very, very happy to been able to fulfill Rinpoche's wishes and just continue to keep going and not stop, just no matter what, continuing to keep the Dharma going no matter what, under all circumstances. So I believe this is the 11th one. And we're into only that second category still, but we're making our way through, and we're understanding more and more as we do so, and getting a better taste of what it would be, what would need to happen to get bodhicitta, and what it would be like if we had it, and why we'd want to have it, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at the outline, we have first, we have basis. We went over the basis. What kind of physical and mental basis do you need in order to get aspiring bodhicitta and in order to get engaged bodhicitta? So we went over that. And then we went over the causes generally that will be necessary in order to get the aspiring bodhicitta and engaged bodhicitta. And we found that there were causes, conditions, and powers that we went over very clearly. And then we got to the next part, which were the specific root causes for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And we found that there were 2 lineages of instruction, both coming from Buddha Shakyamuni. And the lineage of instruction that we're focusing on this evening is the lineage that went from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya to Master Asanga, down through what's called the extensive deeds lineage, down to Master Salimpa, and then Lord Atisha. And this is the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And this particular lineage of instruction was more of the outward teaching that was given on bodhicitta. The equalizing and exchanging self with others practice was considered more of a secret teaching, not because people were greedy about it or miserly with it. It just required a little bit more skill set in order to understand it, and it could be very easily misunderstood, whereas the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment was taught much more publicly than the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, which was passed down through that profound view lineage that we've spoken about. And the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Manjushri, to Nagarjuna and masters like Shantideva and so forth, and then eventually to Salimpa and Lord Atisha. And that particular lineage of equalizing, exchanging self with others was kept more secret. There's parts to have to understand about the non-duality of self and other, and there were a lot of other things that need to be understood and kind of nuances that make the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice much more subtle and much more easy to misunderstand. So this evening, we aren't focusing on that instruction, but we will in the following weeks. We're going to get very, very in depth into that teaching. But for now, let's finish up the 7-point cause and effect instruction for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So we said over these weeks that we've been going over the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that there were certain preliminaries that were going to be necessary to have engaged in to actually even begin generating the causes in this instruction for generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment. And when we look at the mind training texts, which are, talking about this other lineage of instruction of the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice instruction, we find in the 7-point thought transformation where it says, first train in the preliminaries. So they cover an entire body of teachings in the Lojong, a lot of times with just saying first train in the preliminaries. And then it requires the student to have had those preliminaries taught to them by their teacher. There's an assumption made that you know what those preliminaries are if you've gotten to that level. And the same holds true for the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. We don't find this instruction at the beginning of the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. We don't find this at the beginning of instructions in any of the Lam Rim stages of the path to enlightenment texts. We don't find these kind of thoughts in Kamala Shila's stages of meditation right in the beginning. We find that these thoughts have to be matured and brought about through relying on the preliminaries. So what are these preliminaries that we're talking about? The preliminaries are the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, where we go for refuge and engage in ethics, which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities and acknowledge our downfalls. And we focus over and over and over again on the downfalls of the lower realms of cyclic existence, and understand that we have this human basis and have so much gratitude for this human basis that we have, and we know why it's so important, and we want to get out of the lower realms of cyclic existence because we know that we won't be able to practice in those lower realms, and we know that the sufferings are so great in those lower realms. So we go for refuge, and we engage in ethical behavior that will allow us to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. And we acknowledge anything that we've engaged in that was non-virtuous that would cause us to be born into the lower realms of cyclic existence. And we focus on how great this human basis is, so that when we're reborn, we're just being thrust because of all of these aspirations and because of all these ideas and because of all this wisdom and understanding about how precious this human basis of leisure and endowment is. It has these 8 qualities and 10 qualities that we then will naturally, in our future lives, have a basis to practice from and to keep going from. So it's assumed in training in the preliminaries that we've learned about, this human basis and death and impermanence, and learned about the karma and its results and going for refuge, the basic teachings of shared in common with beings of small capacity. And then it's also assumed that we've taken that next step to kind of look at cyclic existence in totality and see that there are downfalls in the higher realms of cyclic existence as well. And this, because of this investigation that we've done into the 4 Noble Truths, we then get a desire to want to emerge from cyclic existence and realize that we can do so by practicing the 3 highest higher trainings. So it's in dependence upon those practices that we then can train in the preliminary that we see actually in the section in the Lam Rim Chemo, right before the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. So the preliminary for that is developing impartiality towards 3 types of being, the friends, enemies, and neutrals. But that practice is assuming that you yourself has thought about the downfalls of cyclic existence and want to definitely emerge from the lower realms, and then want to definitely emerge from all of cyclic existence. And then based on that knowledge that you have about yourself and what you want to do, you turn that desire to emerge towards sentient beings and thinking about how they would emerge, and that thinking about how nice it would be if they would be out of suffering as well, out of the suffering that you know all about and that you want nothing to do with, you then think about it for others. So you have this solid foundation in the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, as Rinpoche drilled into our head over and over and over and over again. And then you practice this impartiality. You try to develop a more reasonable attitude, an attitude that equally wishes to be of benefit to three kinds of beings. Who are those three kinds of beings? Our friends, our enemies, and those who are neutral to us. And then if we use the logic in the rest of the Lam Rim, we also have to say, and all other sentient beings, because we find that later on when we're talking about our friends, enemies, and neutrals. Neutrals are generally referring to those people who we would just cast aside. We don't have a feeling of attachment to or aversion to. So they're those people that we just see. But there's all kinds of sentient beings then that we couldn't even imagine in that format. So we have to say all other sentient beings. So when we're looking at developing this impartiality, we're going about it a little bit differently than we're going about developing the first steps of affection and then the next steps of wishing to get an attitude intent on others' welfare, and then eventually bodhicitta. So at first, when we're dealing with our friends, enemies, and neutrals and trying to develop equanimity, it says we start with our neutrals, then we move to our friends, and then we move to our enemies because of our obvious reactions towards those different types of people. And we want to be able to get to a place where we're equally open to helping all of those types of beings. We're equally open to being able to see a friend, an enemy, a neutral, and everyone else as our mothers. So we're creating a space within our mind that's a fertile ground to grow this idea that all sentient beings are our mother. So we're making this fertile ground of equanimity that we can then say, okay, all sentient beings are my mother. So we don't say have been, we say are my mother, because it's this continuum of consciousness. Right? A kindness shown to us a month ago was still kindness. So a kindness shown to us 2 lifetimes ago was still kindness. Mother who was our mother 2 lifetimes ago is still mother. So all sentient beings are our mother. So we start to think about beginningless lives, and we establish this fact within our mind as we've gone over before in relation to first starting with our friends and then moving on to neutrals and then to our enemies. So we're constantly rechecking, testing to see if this meditation that we're doing is changing our minds. Is our reaction towards these different types of beings changing at all? Or do I still have a little bit of grudge? And, like all sentient beings are my mother except him, her, and that one over there. It's very easy for us to, deal with neutrals and deal with friends. And then those all other ones, those are easy too. The ones on Jupiter and all other beings, that I can, imagine as dots, right? A lot easier to imagine a dot being, than it is to imagine an actual irritating one and then manifesting an idea that irritating being is your kind mother. That irritating being was so helpful to you when you were so vulnerable. That's when you know whether or not it's working, and of course, until you realize this, it doesn't instantaneously happen. As Pabunka Rinpoche says, that we will eventually, through this meditation, instantaneously come upon any being and feel that we are their child, feel that, oh, you've been my mother. At this point, at this stage in the meditation, we aren't, thinking of kindness at this stage in the meditation. We're just would acknowledge spontaneously that all beings that we came in contact with were our kind mother, and that we were their vulnerable child, and we would feel that with certainty and wouldn't need to think about it. So we keep doing these meditations over and over again so that we can make our relationship with others all love and all compassion. And when I say others, eventually every sentient being that have a number we can't imagine in our little minds, and every sentient being that even a Hinayana foe destroyer can't imagine in their minds while they're in nirvana, their minds, even though they've seen emptiness and they no longer have cyclic existence, right? They've gotten rid of fear completely. Their minds aren't big enough to imagine the number of beings that we're talking about that will be our object eventually. So we really are expanding this, and we're looking at doing this in a very, very grand fashion. So it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of work to develop this sort of thing. And as we, even while we're progressing on the Bodhisattva path, our ability to interact with more and more diverse sentient beings becomes greater. Because our abilities become greater well before we're a Buddha. We get to interact with and actually help these beings that we only read about. So it's through what we're doing right now that we will turn into beings that are like that can be of more and more benefit to others, and we'll find intense joy in doing that, and we'll want to only do that at all times because of the intense joy that comes along with it. So that's what we're kind of pumping up to. That's what we're building up to, an intense amount of joy. That's what everyone has to understand. These bodhisattvas, being willing to endure the suffering for sentient beings. We see that this is one of the causes, right, for developing this aspiring bodhicitta. But understand that bodhisattvas, they say, have a greater joy than, hearers or solitary realizers who, are superior beings, right? In terms of their realization. A bodhisattva who hasn't even seen emptiness has a greater joy at all times than these superior beings who've seen the nature of reality, who sometimes it's said who are abiding in nirvana. They have a greater joy in cyclic existence than the beings, the hearers and solitary realizers abiding in nirvana. So we find all these points made. So it's going to take a lot of kind of work on our minds to get to a place where we could have that kind of vision, right? That kind of loving, compassionate vision, that ultimate loving and compassionate vision. So we see sentient beings as our mothers, and then we think about the kindness they've shown to us. We've gone over that in extensive detail. We do that in relation to our friends, our neutrals, and then our enemies, and then all other sentient beings. And then we wish to repay their kindness, and we think about that in terms of how we could really, really repay them. Could we in some way make them never have to suffer again? Could we show them how to not suffer again? Could we show them how to have, infinite happiness? The kind of happiness that I would like to give those who were kindest to me would be the most I could give them. So we start to think at this point about our friends, our neutrals and enemies, and all other sentient beings that I would really love to repay this kindness that they've shown to me. They've been so kind to me in my most vulnerable stage. They were willing to put my needs before their own. Couldn't I just do that for them? And what could I do for them that would be enough? So that at this point, we have this aspiration, this wish to repay their kindness in a real way. So these are the first steps that the Lamrim Chenmo says among the 6 steps for creating the 7th result of bodhicitta that are for generating affection for sentient beings. So we're recognizing sentient beings as our mothers, remembering their kindness and wishing to repay their kindness in order to generate this affection that will then make us see all sentient beings as lovable. So it's called love through the force of attraction. We're attracted to these sentient beings because we've built up this huge amount of affection for all of them. So it's so obvious that it's all interrelated, that we're learning about suffering, we're understanding suffering, then we're looking at others who have that suffering. We're equally wanting all of them to not have that because of these prior meditations. We're equally wanting them to have happiness. So at this point, we've built up this affection for sentient beings. We see them as lovable. We see them as beings we would like to have happy, have ultimate happiness. And then we meditate on the next step. And these next 3 steps are steps for developing an attitude intent on others' welfare, an attitude that wants to work for others' welfare. So the first one is called love through the force of attraction, as mentioned. And we generated that because we're attracted to sentient beings and we see them as lovable. So we have as the object of this love, through the force of attraction, sentient beings who don't have happiness. And then the subjective thought, the mental consciousness is thinking how nice it would be if my friends, neutrals, and enemies, and all other sentient beings had happiness and the causes of happiness. May they have happiness and the causes of happiness. I will be part of the cause of making them have happiness and the causes of happiness. So we see this love through the force of attraction even being built up. So it's almost like there's steps within love through the force of attraction that we are using in order to truly manifest a pure love, a love that, has this aspiration that may I be part of that cause. So we're looking at it in terms of our friends, neutrals, enemies, and everyone else, as we have in all the other meditations. And then we're imagining that we have these sentient beings, and we're imagining all of them, and we can imagine in our meditation that we're giving them, all kinds of forms of happiness. Just imagine in our mind that all these sentient beings, that we're giving them all kinds of happiness, mundane and super mundane. Imagine that we're giving them things that would make us happy, things that would make them happy, and then giving them freedom from fear, giving them the ultimate happiness of Buddhahood. So we can think about that as we're generating this desire for beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness, our friends, neutrals, enemies, and all other sentient beings. And then we got to great compassion. And great compassion has as its object of observation sentient beings who are suffering, and it's specifically experiencing among the 3 types of suffering: the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. So that covers all sentient beings in 6 realms of cyclic existence, because all sentient beings, as we know, have among the 3 types of suffering, minimally the pervasive compounded suffering. They will have to be born into a contaminated set of aggregates because of karma and afflictions, if they haven't transcended cyclic existence. If they haven't cut the root of cyclic existence, they will have to be born again. So the object of observation of our compassion is sentient beings who have suffering, have any among those 3 types of suffering. And the thought is very similar to the thought of love. How nice it would be if my friends, neutrals, and enemies, and all other sentient beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be a cause for them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And the meditation that we're doing is thinking about the various types of suffering that we've thought about in the small and medium scope. And the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, we've learned quite a bit about suffering. There isn't a lack of discussion about suffering during that time. So we're using that discussion on suffering to relate to other sentient beings and the suffering that they're having to experience, so that we're building it up more and more and more. How nice it would be if the hell beings were free from the 8 hot hells. The 8 types of hot hell beings were free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May I be a cause for that. How nice it would be if the beings in the 8 cold hells, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you're using that vivid description that you were given previously to be able to extend your meditation and extend your compassion, because we can very easily think about the sufferings that we can relate to, that we've had in our own personal lives. Then we've seen a lot of sufferings and heard about a lot of sufferings that we couldn't even imagine experiencing. But then we also can think about these sufferings that we really haven't imagined, heard, seen, or experienced, and they're described to us in the sutras by the Buddha. This isn't just in the Lam Rim where we find this, fire and brimstone. This is the Buddha explained. Unfortunately, where was the nature of reality, that cyclic existence became very, very hairy at times, very, very ugly, and there were sufferings that we as humans couldn't even imagine. We could relate to some of them. I mean, I was thinking about, some other examples. We're so quick to say that a boiling hell is so hard to imagine, but we put a lobster in a pot and we hear their scream. So how hard is it to imagine that there could be a being who'd experience something a couple notches down worse from that all the time? That's a suffering like that just extended a little bit longer. And in the hell realms, a lot longer when we study it. We see that the length of suffering in those realms is much, much longer than the ones in the realms that we see in the human and animal realms. And that time doesn't seem to work the same way. And that a minute can seem like a year there. And we know when we're suffering, a minute seems like a year, right? And that's just in our little perspective of suffering. And then we can think of, these higher forms of happiness that these beings are abiding in. And we know what it's like to have a high form of happiness and then have it crash land. So these beings that are so ignorant, that are abiding in these states that they think are so great, are going to have to crash land. So we're thinking about all 6 realms of cyclic existence. That's how we end up at all sentient beings. We start at the ones that we can think about, friends, neutrals, enemies, and then we go to everyone else. And the everyone else we find in these descriptions, and we find in our imagined the ways that we can imagine it. So it's so important that we're thinking about it in this way, and we're thinking that, may my friends, neutrals and enemies, and all other beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then, when we get done with this kind of thought where we're building up our love and compassion by saying how nice it would be, may they, I'll be a cause for it. Another beautiful, beautiful thing we find in the explanation of the 4 immeasurables and in the liberation in the palm of your hand, where it says there's a 4th step then. First you say how nice it would be, and then you say may they, and then you say I'll be part of that cause, and then you say, oh, gurus, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, please bless me to be able to do that. Please help me. This is what I want. I want to do this, okay? So now we're connecting with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. We're connecting with our teachers, and we're asking them to show us how to become Buddhas again. We're saying, please bless me. How do they bless us? Not with rain. They bless us by teaching us, by giving us more insight, by showing us a clearer pathway to that goal of Buddhahood, where we will be able to cause beings to have happiness and cause beings to be free from suffering by teaching them the truth, the way the Buddha did. So we can make this aspiration that's so wonderful. And if we do so, we connect with our teacher. We say, Kensur Geshe Wandak, may you bless me to be able to make this happen. Be a cause for beings to have happiness. Be a cause for beings to be free from suffering. So these are the things that we're doing when we're sitting down on our meditation cushion. We're going into these kind of details. And on Sunday, we went over in the Lam Rim, the 6 preparations. And so what we do before we sit down and think about these things. So we're starting to see an entire package of how we do these preparations. Then we meditate on the teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity and medium capacity, and then great capacity, right? And then within great capacity, we see the perfection vehicle and the tantric vehicle. And we see it all being one kind of straight line to Buddhahood. And it's just so amazing. So what happens now? So now we've said, we've got this idea that I want to be a cause for them to be happy. I want to be a cause for them to be free from suffering. And our object of observation is all sentient beings. We're putting it in our mind that we will eventually land at all, right? We aren't going to be satisfied with the immeasurable, what is immeasurable to a lesser vehicle practitioner, even though it's what they can measure is immeasurable to us. We won't be satisfied with that. We're shooting for being able to work with everyone. We're not going to shoot for being able to work with almost everyone, because that gets us to a partial benefit for ourselves, let alone others, right? We don't fulfill our own needs completely if we get this partial realization about almost all of the beings, right? It's more than we know now, but it's not enough to make us omniscient. It's not enough to let us have infinite happiness and give it to others. So at this point in the game, we get what's called the extraordinary attitude. This is number 6. This extraordinary attitude, it's sometimes translated as altruism. It says, it's basically like, now you've developed this affection that's just permeates you for all these sentient beings. Now you want them all to be happy and free from suffering. So the next step is you say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take on myself this task to free them all. It's called the extraordinary attitude, altruism. It springs out of this, I want to be a cause for them to be happy. I want to be a cause for them to be free from suffering. So at those points, it was more of an aspiration. It wasn't a determined attitude at that point. It wasn't like making the determination to be the one that frees them all from suffering. I'm determined to be the one, the reliable one, the one. I'm going to do it. So that's the 6th step. That is, you've been built up to this step where you're saying, okay, I have to do it. I understand my suffering. I understand their suffering. I understand that the, infinite happiness that I want. I understand that I want them to have infinite happiness. I'm going to give it to them. I'm doing it. I'm going for it. And then what happens is there's a slight deflation that takes place, but then courage. The deflation that takes place in that mind is, oh, wait a second. I'm in cyclic existence myself. I don't have freedom from fear. I still have the suffering of change, and pervasive compounded suffering. I'm not omniscient. I don't know what all sentient beings need. The Buddha taught, as we know, many, many different kinds of teachings for the varieties of sentient beings, because the Buddha was omniscient and knew what each and every single one of those sentient beings needed at the time and at that moment. I don't have that ability. I still see and differentiate and have kind of some biases in terms of my ability to not see everyone, not help everyone. So who could help everyone? And then we've learned very, very well who that being is, because we take refuge in that being. We know who we consider our reliable guide to be, because we've established that Buddha is a reliable guide by understanding that the Buddha alone taught the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha alone has explained how, through this intense love and compassion, coupled with the wisdom realizing emptiness, that one could become omniscient. Buddha alone taught that. The Buddha achieved that state of omniscience. The Buddha achieved a state that is all loving, all compassion, all caring, and also is omniscient and all powerful in terms of having power to emanate all of these different bodies and put his or her mind everywhere at all times, and to understand conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously at all times. And this is the kind of being that we would need to be if we wanted to know how to give beings happiness, causes of happiness and suffering, free them from suffering and the causes of suffering. So we arrive at the only possible option. We've run out of options, right? We've run out of options in cyclic existence. We know that all this contaminated happiness isn't happiness for us. We know that we suffer and we have the suffering of suffering, and we're going to be thrown again and again and again. And all this, we know all of this. And we know that everyone else is in that same predicament. And the only being that's been able to figure out how to, end suffering in a complete way and have the highest amount of happiness possible is the Buddha. So we then have to make the obvious decision to become Buddhas. And this isn't because it just makes sense at that point. It's something that is black and white to us at that point if we've done this meditation. When we have this generation of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, it's not, for an hour or two. It's usually forever. This realization, there are cases when one generates this mind that aspires to enlightenment on the path of accumulation at the smallest level where a bodhisattva could lose his or her bodhicitta. Very, very rare, not likely. But for the most part, once this mind's generated, it doesn't go away. So if you're wondering if you're a bodhisattva, ask yourself, do I day and night want to get out of cyclic existence? First of all, do I think of nothing else but getting out of cyclic existence? Did I do that at any point? And do I day and night, because of that, and because of love and compassion, want to become a Buddha for others' sake, and only that? Is that all I think day and night about? Is day and night everything that I'm doing for the sake of others, to become a Buddha for the sake of others? Is it to put others' needs before my own? Is it is everything I do day and night to demolish the gross and subtle self-cherishing attitude? I mean, that's what it will take, day and night, demolishing the subtle and coarse self-cherishing attitude. So, that is an explanation of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. A very, very beautiful, beautiful practice to be able to do, and one that I encourage everyone to meditate on and see how, if you do, it changes your interactions with sentient beings, how it will make you less likely to harm others, and less likely to stay unreasonable for long periods of time, because we naturally react, we naturally get angry. We don't have the skill set. We're maturing, right? We're proliferating. We don't have the perfect skill set. But when we do blow up, when we do get angry, when we do get frustrated, how long does it take for us to bring that back to reasonable? That's really the acid test. Are we walking around in the supermarket annoyed? Or are we saying, oh, it's so wonderful that these people are here and they were all so kind to me and they're being nourished? Think about the meditations that we can do at all times in our life. I bring up the supermarket because everybody goes to the supermarket for the most part, and sees a lot of people when you go do that. And just think about what you're pushing that cart around. You have a list, go in with a list so that you could do this meditation and you don't have to think about, oh, what else do I need? Go in with a list, so you can, in the meantime, be looking and thinking, oh, it's so wonderful that they're getting food to nourish their body. Hopefully they can have a long human existence and meet with the Dharma. May I in some way be able to help them meet with the Dharma. Now, that doesn't mean go up to them and say, hi, I'm from Buddhist Center. No, we don't proselytize. This is an aspiration. We're trying to change our own minds, change our own relationship with all beings. And the ones that we have to practice on are at the places that we go to. So we can use these sentient beings to try to practice all of these things that I'm talking about. Looking at these beings in the aisle. Have you been my mother? Why would you have been my mother? Why does that make any sense? Well, since beginningless time, I've had this continuum. So you can do meditation in any place that you are. The Dalai Lama said that a yogi can have high realizations standing in the middle of Times Square, and someone who isn't realized can go to the greatest retreat in the world, the quietest place in the world, and realize nothing. So it's our daily life where we really, really see whether or not this stuff is working. When we're at our job, when our boss walks up to us and starts to say things that we don't want to hear, are we able to slow the process down? Understand that they just want happiness, just like I want happiness. right? What part do I play in this interaction? And what do I have to do to give this person happiness? What do I have to do in order for us to both have some sort of a reasonable experience, you know, based on this knowledge that I now have? Can I change this experience that I'm having for myself and for that person by relying on this information that I've learned? I've learned about karma. Am I willing to just, because, you know, after knowing about karma, when someone's yelling at me, not see my part in it? Am I so dumb to not see that? When I understand that every unpleasant thing that I have to experience is because of a previous non-virtue that I committed? Am I able to see that? Am I able to see at that moment that, yeah, this is a manifestation of something that I did before, recognizing that there's somebody now who's, you know, being unpleasant to me because before I was unpleasant somehow? You know, are we able to slow things down at least that much? Forget about seeing them as empty of inherent existence. Are we able to slow it down to the point that says, okay, this is a karma that's ripening. This came about from me harming someone, from me yelling at someone. Does it make sense if I don't like the way this feels to yell? Does this make sense for me to get really angry if I know I'm experiencing this because I got really angry before and I don't like this? Does it make sense? Is it being wise for me to react out of anger at that point? That's how we put these teachings into place. That's how we begin to understand. Sorry about the lights going on and off. We have a motion sensor that's deciding to illuminate us at, at random times. I won't go on any more than that. We're running out of light, but I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to discuss such a great topic. This stuff really does work if you apply it. Don't just take it as an intellectual exercise. Don't take this information as something that you learned and can rattle off. We can all rattle off a bunch of facts about Buddhism. Even people who went to college and took a course, you know, an introduction to Buddhism course that could care less about any of it can rattle facts off about Buddhism. But it's if we know these facts about Buddhism that we can rattle off, can we integrate them into our lives? We have to know them. If we can rattle them off, it means we've heard them, we've put them in there, but have we analyzed them and then meditated on them? And, you know, the wisdom arisen from meditation is that integration in our life, familiarizing ourselves. You know, we hear about it, then we analyze it. Oh, is karma, is that true? Isn't that true? And then the acid test is our meditation, our familiarization with it, our realization into it. That's it. We will move on to equalizing and exchanging self with others next week, and we'll pull from a lot of great texts to do that. And I just want to say thank you, all of you. Thank you to all of you for listening. And does anyone have any questions before we get going? And I just want to remind everyone, I'm sure all of you have done so, please go to Buddha's Center on YouTube and subscribe. By subscribing and by liking and by staying on for like the whole teaching. I know this sounds like promoting, but unfortunately, this is what we have to do in this world. It gets us further in the algorithm, so more people will have access to these teachings. So if you can do your part to share these teachings and try to help promote them, because I was telling Coleman the story when I asked him to do so about Rinpoche and I driving around, right, in the old Oldsmobile Omega and flyering, going to Yale and going to Borders Books and Music and going to all these various places to put up flyers. And I was always wondering, I always say to him, Rinpoche, are you sure you want to go with me? He would actually staple them, you know, back in the day. And I'd say to him, are you sure you want to go? I can go flyer. Like I'd been in a lot of bands by then. I knew all about flyering. And, you know, I had kind of narrowed it down to the great places to flyer. And he said, no, this is so great. It's, you know, it's generosity. We're giving people access to the Dharma. So I saw him with his own hands wanting more people to be able to have access to the Dharma. And remember sometimes seeing 50 people show up at those teachings, right? On Main Street. Any of those at 504 Main Street would remember when those numbers of people would come. And so sometimes we'd have people lined up outside coming into the building. And it was because of Rinpoche wanting to get the Dharma to as many people as possible. So this is the only reason I ask you to get involved with the evil world of algorithms and, the social dilemma. I ask you to dive into that pool, unfortunately. But if you're not comfortable, please don't dive in that pool. But this is the reasoning behind me asking you this. All the teachings are up on YouTube. They're bunched in sets now and stuff too. We're learning more and more about this as we go. So we're doing this slowly on purpose so that we can eventually blossom into something beautiful and have Geshe Aga giving us teachings and have Geshe Ma Tenzin Lodrinla, if we can get her to come give some teachings, and we can invite all the holy beings as they come through once we have a place established for them to come to. So these are all aspirations at this point, and let's see if we all want it bad enough to make that happen. So that's it. We have to see if this community can stay together and wants to have, this little seed, turn into, something much bigger. And Rinpoche was all for it. So here we are, growing seeds. So thank you, everyone. Let's do the concluding prayers, and if I can still even see them, and we'll close. Okay, so the 8 verses on training the mind, and may keep everybody in your prayers that's having a hard time, any kind of difficulties, and all sentient beings are having a hard time, because if you have attachment, and you have hatred and you have ignorance, you definitely have an unpleasant mind. So let's pray for all beings to no longer have to experience that unpleasant mind caused by self-cherishing and grasping at true establishment. The 8 verses on training the mind by Geshe Langri Tambo. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely dear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all, and respectively hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions, I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as a disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings, if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and so on, I will learn to take all loss and offer the victory to them. When the one whom I benefited with great hope unfortunately hurts me very badly, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone, everywhere, without exception, all help and happiness, directly and indirectly, and respectively take upon myself all the harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all these practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like illusion, be released from the bondage of attachment. Bear with me for a second here. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land, surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I pray that we may never be separated from Khensur Geshe Wandak in whatever emanation he or she chooses to meet us in. May we meet him or her in the emanation body in our world systems, and eventually see emptiness and be able to meet him or her in the enjoyment body. May we create virtue and merit to keep that relationship a continuous relationship, and may we swiftly become Buddhas and be able to help Khenser Geshe Wandak free all sentient beings from suffering. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it, and we'll see you on Sunday. Just a quick announcement. Sharpa Chuje Rinpoche, who is the next person in line for the Ganden throne, the Lama Tsung, the head of the Gelugpa lineage, basically, is in Ithaca, New York right now. On Saturday, he's at Namgyal in Ithaca. Saturday, he's giving the 3 Wrathful Ones initiation. He just gave a white Tara initiation. Some of you may have seen it. But he just gave a white Tara initiation. Being in person would be best. But it is on Facebook. And on Saturday, he's giving the 3 Wrathful Ones of Vajrapani, Haryagriva, and Garuda, the one that Rinpoche gave us. And he's a very accomplished master from Drepung, and in a similar age group as Rinpoche, a little bit younger, a couple of years, maybe 2 or 3 years, but in that same age group, and considered a very, very realized High Lama. So I encourage everyone to attend that. And as I see, Priscilla, you have your hand up. Yes.
Concerning the teaching from Ithaca, on Friday night, he is also giving a preliminary introduction,
Yes, I saw.
commentary to the teaching that's going to happen on Saturday.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I saw that. There's a geshe. You'll have to look into it, but a geshe is explaining what wrathful practices are for in preparation for that. So thank you so much, Priscilla.
Yeah, I think that'll make the actual empowerment more meaningful.
Yes.
If we listen to Friday night.
Yes.
So it's Namgyal Monastery. Do you know the website?
I don't off the top of my hand, but if you go on Facebook, you'll have to search around a little bit. I posted it before on, I'll post it on Tara Mantra, so you can look it up, the exact, I'll do a repost on it, exactly where it is, and anyone can find it there.
It's like Namgyal Monastery for something or other studies.
Higher studies, something. I don't want to say it wrong, so it'll be on Tara Mantra, and encourage everyone to go to Tara Mantra. You see a lot of Rinpoche's pictures and a lot of wonderful things, all the offerings that Rinpoche's made, and so forth. And we have some great announcements coming up about that too as well. But I won't spoil that until I have all the wonderful news so that I can give you all a great present. So I will.
You have to pre-register for Friday night.
Okay.
And for Saturday. So I want people to know that they can't just log on to Zoom and think they're going to see it. You have to pre-register.
Thank you so much. So everyone, have a wonderful, wonderful week. Please try to put these teachings into practice, and do what you can to mature your consciousness. And if you don't do it now, when will you have time? When, again, do you know that you'll have the causes and conditions in the brain the mind that will be able to understand this stuff? Who knows? The time is now. So thank you.